Senior Watcher Calvos had served at the Central Monitoring Hub for 32 years. She had seen asteroid storms that swallowed moons. She had watched stellar flares burn entire colonies to ash. She had tracked enemy fleets during 3 different border wars. Nothing had ever made her hands shake until now. The display in front of her showed something that should not exist. A vessel had entered Dominion space without warning, without permission, and without any record in the archives. This alone was strange. The Vethkari Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had cataloged every species, every ship design, every engine signature known to exist. Their sensor network stretched across 40,000 star systems. Nothing moved in their territory without their knowledge, but this ship had appeared from nowhere, and it was moving at speeds that broke every law of physics the Dominion understood. Calvos ran the scan again. Then again. The results stayed the same. The vessel was small, perhaps 400 meters long. Its shape was simple and clean, like a blade made of dark metal. It had no visible weapons, no markings, no identification signals. The computer could not match it to any known species. It could not even guess where it had come from, and its speed. By the stars, its speed. The vessel was not using any form of faster-than-light travel that the Dominion recognized. It was not jumping through space or riding gravity wells or tearing holes in reality. It appeared to be compressing the space around itself, folding the universe like cloth to cross impossible distances in moments. This was a theory the Dominion had abandoned centuries ago as mathematically impossible. Yet there it was, doing exactly that. Calvos pressed the emergency alert with trembling fingers. Within minutes, her superior appeared at her station. Within an hour, the detection had reached high command. Within 6 hours, the report sat on the desk of Archon Thyssen IV himself, ruler of the Vethkari Dominion and master of all known space. The Archon read the report in his throne room, surrounded by advisors and generals who had grown old in his service. He was ancient by Vethkari standards, nearly 400 years old, and he had never seen anything like this. "This is certain?" he asked, his voice quiet but sharp. Fleet Admiral Vorath stepped forward. He was a tall creature with silver scales and eyes like burning coals. He had won 9 wars for the Dominion and had never known defeat. "The sensors do not lie, my Archon. The vessel is real. It entered our space 14 hours ago and has not slowed down. It's heading directly toward the galactic core, my Archon. Directly toward us." A murmur ran through the assembled leaders. The galactic core was the heart of the Dominion, the most populated region, the seat of their power. Whatever this vessel wanted, it wanted something important. "Have we made contact?" the Archon asked. "We've tried every known frequency and language," Vorath replied. "The vessel does not respond. It does not slow down. It does not deviate. It simply continues forward as if we do not exist." The Archon's fingers tightened on the arms of his throne. In 12,000 years of Dominion rule, no one had ever ignored them. Every species in the galaxy knew the Vethkari. Every species feared them, or served them, or had been crushed by them. The idea that something could enter their space and simply not care was beyond insulting. It was terrifying. "What do we know about this species?" the Archon demanded. His chief scholar, a bent-old creature named Mython, stepped forward with a datapad. "Nothing, my Archon. The vessel matches no known design. Its engine signature is completely unique. Its hull material does not appear in our databases. We have searched every archive, every record, every fragment of data from the past 10,000 years. There is no mention of anything like this. Then where did it come from? Unknown. Our best guess is that it originated somewhere beyond the mapped galaxy. But that region is empty. Dead space. Nothing lives there. Clearly, the Archon said coldly. Something does. He stood from his throne and walked to the great window that looked out over the capital city. Below him stretched a world of towering spires and endless lights, home to 8 billion Vethkari. Beyond it hung the orbital stations and defense platforms that protected the heart of the Empire. And somewhere out there, moving through his territory like he did not matter, was a single small ship that had thrown everything into chaos. Admiral Vorath, the Archon said without turning around. My Archon? Take the Second Armada. Intercept this vessel. Find out what it is, what it wants, and where it came from. If it will not answer, make it answer. If it will not stop, make it stop. The Dominion does not tolerate mysteries in its own space. Vorath bowed deeply. It will be done, my Archon. The Second Armada has 800 warships and 2 million crew. Whatever this vessel is, it cannot stand against such force. The Archon nodded slowly. I expect results, Admiral. Do not disappoint me. As Vorath turned to leave, Scholar Mathon spoke up again. Her voice was old and thin, but something in it made everyone stop. My Archon, if I may speak, you may. I have studied the unknown regions of space for many years. There are old stories, fragments from species we conquered long ago. Tales of a small blue world on the edge of nothing, home to a young and violent species. They were considered primitive and unimportant. Then, 3,000 years ago, they vanished from all records. No explanation. No trace. They simply disappeared. Your point, Scholar? Mathon looked at her datapad, then at the Archon. The stories called them humans. They were known for 2 things above all else. First, they were impossibly stubborn. They never surrendered, never retreated, never accepted defeat, even when defeat was certain. Second, they learned faster than any species ever recorded. They could take enemy technology and improve it within a generation. And you think this vessel belongs to them? I think, my Archon, that if this vessel does belong to them, then we must be very, very careful. A species that's stubborn, with 3,000 years to learn and grow without anyone watching them. She paused and took a breath. I do not know what they might have become. The Archon stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to the window. Superstition and old tales. Admiral Vorath, you have your orders. Vorath bowed again and left to prepare his fleet. 800 warships. The pride of the Dominion. Enough firepower to crack a planet in half. After all, he told himself as he walked to the shuttle bay, it was only one ship. How dangerous could it be? The Second Armada spread across 3 million kilometers of space like a wall of steel and fire. 800 warships hung in perfect formation, their weapons charged, their crews ready. At the center sat the flagship Dominion's Wrath, a 9-kilometer mountain of armor and guns that had burned worlds to glass. Admiral Vorath stood on the command bridge and watched the sensor display with quiet confidence. The unknown vessel had dropped out of its impossible speed and now drifted toward them at normal velocity. It was small, so terribly small. His flagship alone could swallow it 100 times over. Around him, his officers exchanged glances and nervous laughs. This was the threat that had sent the Archon into panic? This tiny blade of dark metal that looked like it might break apart in a strong solar wind? Admiral, his sensor officer reported, the vessel has come to a complete stop. It is holding position directly ahead of the fleet. Distance? 10,000 kilometers. Vorath allowed himself a small smile. Open a channel. All frequencies. The communication officer worked her console. Channel open, Admiral. Vorath straightened his uniform and spoke in his most commanding voice. Unknown vessel. This is Fleet Admiral Vorath of the Vethkari Dominion Second Armada. You have entered sovereign territory without permission. You will identify yourself immediately. You will state your species, your origin, and your purpose. You will then submit to inspection and escort to the nearest detention facility. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. You have 60 seconds to respond. The bridge fell silent. 60 seconds passed. Nothing. Admiral, no response on any frequency. Vorath's smile faded. Repeat the message. They repeated it. Still nothing. The unknown vessel simply hung in space, silent and still, as if the 800 warships surrounding it were beneath its notice. Then, without warning, the vessel spoke. The voice came through every speaker on every ship in the fleet simultaneously. It was calm and clear and spoke perfect Vithkari, without accent or error. This should have been impossible. No species with no contact history could speak their language so flawlessly. Yet the voice rolled through the fleet like it belonged there. We are the vessel Prometheus. We seek passage through this region of space. We mean no harm to you or your people unless harm is offered to us. We ask that you allow us to continue on our way. Vorath stared at the speaker as if it had grown teeth. How do they know our language? No one had an answer. He pressed the communication button with more force than necessary. Prometheus, your request is denied. You will submit to inspection or you will be destroyed. This is not negotiable. The voice came back immediately, still calm, still patient. We recognize no authority over our movement. We claim sovereign transit rights under interstellar convention. We will continue on our course. We advise you not to interfere. There is no such convention. Vorath shouted. The Dominion rules this space. You will obey or you will die. A pause. Then, we hoped you would choose wisdom. It seems you have chosen otherwise. Understand this, Admiral. We do not wish to harm you, but we will not be stopped. Please consider your next action carefully. Vorath had heard enough. He turned to his weapons officer with fury burning in his eyes. Warning shots. Full spread. Show them what they face. The weapons officer hesitated for just a moment, then obeyed. 30 ships fired simultaneously. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds screamed across space toward the tiny vessel dot and missed. Every single shot passed through empty space. The vessel had not moved. It had not activated shields. It had simply been somewhere else when the weapons arrived, then returned to exactly where it was before. The whole thing happened so fast that the sensors could barely track it. What just happened? Vorath demanded. Admiral, I don't know. The vessel appears to have shifted position by several hundred meters for approximately 3 nanoseconds, then returned. It moved faster than our weapons could travel. The voice returned, and now there was something harder in it. Something cold. That was your warning shot. We will not give you another. Stand down your fleet, Admiral. Allow us to pass. No one needs to be hurt today. But Vorath was beyond reason now. He had been humiliated in front of his entire fleet. This tiny ship had made a fool of him, had spoken to him like he was a child playing with toys. Rage clouded his judgment and drowned his caution. All ships. He growled into the fleet-wide channel. Full barrage. Everything we have. Destroy that vessel. 800 warships open fire at once. The space between the fleet and the Prometheus filled with light. Plasma, missiles, kinetic rounds, particle beams, gravity bombs. Every weapon the Dominion had ever invented screamed toward that small dark ship in a wave of destruction that could have cracked a moon dot, and then the wave stopped. Every single projectile, every beam, every missile froze in mid-flight. They hung in space like frozen stars, motionless, suspended by some force that the Dominion had no name for. The entire fleet stared in shocked silence at a wall of their own weapons hanging in the void. Then the weapons turned around. Slowly, impossibly, every single shot reversed direction. They pointed back at the ships that had fired them, back at the fleet, back at Vorath. The voice of the Prometheus returned, and now it carried no patience at all. You were warned. Vorath had exactly 3 seconds to realize the truth. They had not been fighting an enemy. They had been annoying something so far beyond them that their greatest weapons were toys. They had kicked at a sleeping giant, and now the giant was awake. All ships! He screamed. Evasive action. Shields to maximum. Get us out of... The weapons fired, but they did not destroy. That was the terrible part. The Dominion could have understood destruction. They knew war. They knew death. What happened instead was something far more frightening. Every weapon struck its own ship with perfect precision, but instead of explosion, there was silence. The plasma did not burn. The missiles did not detonate. Instead, every system on every ship simply died. Engines went cold. Weapons went silent. Sensors went dark. Navigation, communication, life support, all of it just stopped. 800 warships went dead in their hulls in less than 10 seconds. Vorath stood on a dark ridge lit only by emergency lights that flickered and failed. Around him, his crew stumbled and fell as gravity plating lost power. The great Dominion's wrath, pride of the fleet, drifted helplessly through space like a piece of debris. Only one system still functioned. The speakers crackled to life one final time. Your ships are disabled but intact. Your crews are alive. Life support will reactivate in 6 hours. You will drift here until rescue arrives. Consider this mercy. Consider this a lesson. A long pause. We wished only to pass through. You chose violence. We do not blame you for your fear. Fear makes species do foolish things. But understand this, Admiral. We could have killed every soul in your fleet with a thought. We chose not to. Remember that when you report to your Archon. Remember that we showed you what we could have done and chose something else. The speaker died. Through the emergency viewport, Vorath watched the Prometheus resume its course toward the galactic core. It moved slowly at first, then faster, then impossibly fast, until it vanished into the darkness between stars. He stood there for a long time, floating in the dead silence of his ruined flagship, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to accept that everything he knew about power and war and the Dominion's place in the galaxy had just been proven wrong. What were these humans? Where had they come from? What had they become in 3,000 years of silence? And most importantly, what did they want? The answers would not come for days. And when they did, they would change everything. The throne room of Sithara Prime had never been so quiet. Archon Thesan IV sat motionless on his seat of power, the report displayed on the screen before him playing for the 3rd time. Around him stood his generals and advisors, but no one spoke. No one dared. The Second Armada. 800 warships. 2.3 million crew. The greatest military force the Dominion had assembled in a century. Disabled in 10 seconds by a single ship that was not even trying to fight. The reports from the survivors were all the same. The unknown vessel had shown them exactly how powerless they were. It had turned their own weapons against them, shut down their ships with a technology no one could understand, and then left them alive. That last part was the most disturbing. An enemy that destroyed you could be understood. An enemy that chose mercy was something else entirely. How is this possible? The Archon finally asked. His voice was barely a whisper that no one answered. The screen changed to show a new detection. Then another. Then 100 more. Vessels identical to the Prometheus were entering Dominion space from every direction. They were not attacking. They were not threatening. They were simply arriving and moving toward the galactic core with the same impossible speed and the same complete silence. How many? The Archon demanded. His sensor chief checked her data with shaking hands. As of this morning, my Archon, we have detected over 3,000 vessels. More arrive every hour. At current rates, there could be tens of thousands within a week. The Archon closed his eyes. Tens of thousands, each one capable of what the Prometheus had done. The math was simple and terrible. If even 100 of these ships decided to attack instead of simply passing through, the Dominion would fall within days. What do they want? He asked the room. Why are they here? Why now? Scholar Mithun stepped forward. She looked older than she had days ago, worn down by the weight of what she had discovered. My Archon, I have been searching the oldest archives. The fragments I mentioned before, the stories of the humans from 3,000 years ago. I found more. Tell me. She activated her datapad, and a projection filled the center of the room. It showed a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy. A primitive world by Dominion standards, covered in water and green life. This was Earth, Mithun said. The human homeworld. 3,000 years ago, they were an emerging species. They had just discovered faster-than-light travel. They were expanding into nearby systems, building colonies, making contact with other species. By all accounts, they were unremarkable. Violent, yes. Stubborn, certainly. But nothing special. The species that ruled the galaxy at that time considered them too primitive to notice. And then something happened. The records are unclear, but it appears the humans encountered something at the edge of the galaxy. Something terrible. A threat from beyond known space. They fought a war against it, a war that nearly destroyed them. When it was over, they sealed themselves away from the rest of the galaxy. They stopped all contact. They disappeared from every record, every sensor, every archive. For 3,000 years, no one knew what happened to them. She paused and looked at the Archon with something like fear in her eyes. I believe they have been preparing, my Archon. Whatever they fought 3,000 years ago, they expected it to return. They have spent 30 centuries building, learning, growing. What we saw attack our fleet was not a primitive species anymore. It was something that has evolved beyond anything we can understand. The Archon stared at the projection of Earth for a long moment. You said they fought something at the edge of the galaxy. Something terrible. What was it? The records do not say, but there are hints, references to a force that consumed worlds. That ate stars. That spread across space like a disease, destroying everything in its path. The humans called it many things. The devouring tide, the endless hunger, the dark between. A chill ran through the throne room. Even the most hardened generals shifted uncomfortably. And you think this threat is returning? I think, my Archon, that the humans would not have revealed themselves after 3,000 years of hiding unless they had a very good reason. They are not invading us. They are not attacking us. They are moving toward the galactic core with purpose and speed. They are gathering. Gathering for what? Mithun shook her head slowly. I do not know, but I fear we are about to find out. A communication officer burst into the throne room, breaking every rule of protocol. His face was pale with shock. My Archon! Forgive the interruption, but the vessel Prometheus has stopped. It is holding position near the way station at Kethros. It is broadcasting a message. What message? The officer swallowed hard. It is asking for a representative of the Dominion. It says it wishes to talk. Silence fell over the room again. The Archon looked at his generals, at his advisors, at Mithun. None of them had answers. None of them knew what to do. Finally, the Archon spoke. Who would we send? Who could possibly speak for the Dominion to something like this? Mithan surprised everyone by raising her hand. I will go, my Archon. I have studied them longer than anyone. If anyone can understand what they want, it is me. But before the Archon could respond, another voice spoke up. I will go. Calvo stepped forward from her position at the back of the room. She had been summoned to the capital to give her report on the initial detection. She had expected to be dismissed afterward, forgotten in the chaos. But something in her would not let her stay silent. I was the first to see them, she said. I tracked them from the moment they entered our space. I have watched every movement they have made. Scholar Mithan has the knowledge, but I have the eyes. Send us both. The Archon studied her for a long moment. She was nobody. A sensor operator. A watcher. But there was something in her face that he recognized. Determination. Courage. The willingness to walk into the unknown because someone had to. Very well, he said at last. You will go together. You will speak for the Dominion. You will find out what they want and what threatens us all. And you will report back to me. Calvos bowed deeply. I will not fail you, my Archon. As she turned to leave, Mithan fell into step beside her. The old scholar's face was grave. Do you understand what you have volunteered for? Mithan asked quietly. We are about to board a ship built by a species that treated our greatest fleet like insects. We have no idea if we will be allowed to leave. Calvos nodded. I understand. But someone has to go. Someone has to find answers. If not us, then who? Mithan was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, just a little. The humans were right about one thing in the old records. They said stubborn species are the ones that survive. Perhaps the Dominion has more in common with humanity than we knew. They walked together toward the shuttle bay, toward a meeting that would change the fate of the galaxy. Behind them, through the great windows of the throne room, thousands of human vessels moved across the stars like a river of shadow and light. They did not slow down. They did not speak. They simply continued their journey toward whatever waited at the center of everything. The galaxy held its breath. The shuttle felt very small as it approached the Prometheus. Calvos sat at the controls while Mithan reviewed her data for the 100th time. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. Through the viewport, the human vessel grew larger with each passing minute. Up close, it was even more strange than the sensors had shown. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, never quite holding the same shape for more than a moment. There were no visible seams, no panels, no ports. It looked less like a ship and more like a living thing that had decided to take the form of a blade. We're being scanned, Calvos reported. Her instruments showed energy patterns washing over the shuttle, but they were nothing like any scan she had ever seen. It felt like being looked at, studied, understood. Then a section of the Prometheus opened. Not a door or a hatch, but simply an opening that had not existed a moment before. The ship had made a hole in itself to let them in. Calvos flew the shuttle through the opening and set down in a space that should not have fit inside the vessel. The hangar was vast, easily large enough for 50 shuttles. But from the outside, the Prometheus was barely 400 meters long. The math did not work. The space was impossible. Mithan noticed it too. They have folded space inside their own ship. The interior is larger than the exterior. Is that possible? Apparently it is. They stepped out of the shuttle and found a single figure waiting for them. She appeared to be female, roughly humanoid in shape, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a face that was almost familiar. She could have passed for Vethkari from a distance, though her skin was a different color and her features were softer. She wore a simple uniform of dark fabric with no markings of rank, but her eyes were something else entirely. They looked ancient, tired, sad, like she had seen things that no living creature should see and carried the weight of them still. "Welcome to the Prometheus," she said. Her voice was the same one that had spoken to the fleet, calm, patient, gentle. "I am Commander Elena Vasquez. I have been waiting for you." Calvos bowed in the formal manner of the Dominion. "I am Senior Watcher Calvos. This is Scholar Mithon. We speak for the Vethkari Dominion. I know who you are." Elena smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I know more about both of you than you might believe. Please, walk with me. We have much to discuss and not much time." She led them through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they walked. The walls glowed with a soft light that came from everywhere and nowhere. Calvos tried to track their path but found it impossible. The ship was not just bigger on the inside. It was different. It operated by rules she could not understand. "You have questions," Elena said as they walked. "Ask them." Mithon spoke first. "Where have you been for 3,000 years? Why did you disappear? Why are you back now?" Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. 3,000 years ago, we were children playing at the edge of a fire. We had just learned to travel between stars. We thought we were special, important. We were wrong." She stopped at a window that looked out into space. But instead of showing the normal view of stars and void, it showed something else. Images, memories, a story told in light. We met something at the edge of the galaxy. Something that had been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, consuming everything in its path. We called it the Devouring Tide. It was not a species as you understand it. It was more like a force of nature, a hunger given form. It ate stars. It ate worlds. It ate entire civilizations and left nothing behind but empty space. The images showed worlds burning, stars going dark, ships dissolving into nothing as something vast and terrible washed over them. "We fought it," Elena continued. "We were young and stupid and brave, and we fought it anyway. Billions of us died. Our homeworld was nearly destroyed. But in the end, we found a way to push it back, to hurt it, to make it retreat. How?" Calvos asked. "If it was as powerful as you say, how could you possibly win?" Elena turned to face her, and for a moment, something very old looked out through her eyes. "We did not win. We survived. There's a difference. The tide retreated to rebuild its strength. We knew it would return someday, so we made a choice. We sealed ourselves away from the rest of the galaxy. We stopped exploring. We stopped expanding. We focused everything we had on one goal, being ready when it came back." 3,000 years, Mithon whispered. "You spent 3,000 years preparing for a war." "Yes, we built new technologies, new weapons, new ships. We spread sensors across 1,000 galaxies to warn us when the tide began moving again. We changed ourselves, improved ourselves, became something more than we were." She paused. "We became what we needed to be." Calvos felt cold despite the warmth of the ship. "And now? The tide is returning?" "Yes, our sensors detected it 6 months ago. It is moving toward this galaxy. At its current speed, it will arrive in approximately 50 years. When it comes, it will not stop until everything is consumed. Every star, every world, every species." The weight of her words hung in the air like a physical thing. "Why come to us?" Mithon asked. "Why reveal yourselves now? You could have stayed hidden, protected yourselves. Let the rest of the galaxy burn." Elena's expression softened. For a moment, she looked less like an ancient being of impossible power and more like someone very tired who had carried a burden for too long. "Because we remember what it was like to face the darkness alone. We remember the fear, the desperation, The moment when we realized that no one was coming to help us, that we would live or die by our own strength and nothing else. She shook her head slowly. No one deserves that. Not even species who dismissed us as primitive. Not even empires that would have conquered us if they had the chance. Calvo stared at her. You could destroy us. After what we did, after the fleet attacked you, you could wipe us out with a thought. Why show us mercy? Why offer to help us? Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was very soft. Because mercy is a choice. Because kindness is harder than cruelty and means more because of it. Because 3,000 years ago, we were angry and frightened and alone. And we promised ourselves that if we survived, we would never let another species feel what we felt. She gestured, and the images on the window changed. Now, they showed something different. Ships of 100 different designs flying together. Species that had been enemies working side by side. Worlds being fortified. Weapons being built. An entire galaxy preparing for war. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to warn you. To help you prepare. To stand beside you when the darkness comes. She met Calvo's eyes. 50 years is not a long time, but it is enough. If we work together, if we share what we know, if every species in this galaxy puts aside their differences and fights as one, and if we refuse? Mathan asked quietly. If the Dominion chooses to stand alone? Elena's expression did not change, but something hard crept into her voice. Then you will die alone. The tide does not negotiate. It does not accept surrender. It simply consumes. You can join us and have a chance to survive. Or you can stand against us and be swept away by something far worse than humanity has ever been. She stepped closer to Calvos. Close enough that the Vethkari could see the depths of those ancient eyes. Go back to your Archon. Tell him what I have told you. Tell him that humanity is offering something we have never offered before. Partnership, equality, a chance to save everything that exists in this galaxy. The choice is his, but tell him to choose quickly. The tide does not wait. Calvos nodded slowly. She understood now. She understood everything. I will tell him, she said. And I will make sure he listens. Elena smiled, and for a moment, she looked almost human. I believe you will. There is something about you, Watcher Calvos. Something stubborn. Something that refuses to give up even when the odds are impossible. Her smile widened. We have a word for that on Earth. We call it hope. She turned and walked away, the corridor reshaping itself behind her. Calvos and Mithan stood in silence for a long time, watching the stars through the impossible window, trying to accept that everything they knew had just changed forever. The galaxy was not safe. It had never been safe. And now, only one thing stood between them and the end of everything. Humanity, the species everyone had forgotten. The species that never forgot how to fight. 5 years had passed since Calvos stepped aboard the Prometheus. 5 years since she stood before the Archon and told him everything she had learned. 5 years since the Vethkari Dominion made the most difficult decision in its 12,000-year history. They chose to listen. It had not been easy. Pride died hard, especially for a species that had ruled unchallenged for so long. There were rebellions, assassination attempts, entire fleets that refused to accept that the Dominion was no longer supreme. Some species saw the arrival of humanity as an opportunity to break free from Vethkari control. Others saw it as a trick, a deception, a plot by ancient enemies to destroy them from within. But slowly, painfully, the truth spread. The devouring tide was real. The sensors humanity shared with them proved it beyond doubt. Something vast and terrible was moving through the space between galaxies, heading toward them at speeds that would bring it to their borders within decades. And when it arrived, no single species, no matter how powerful, would survive alone. The Galactic Compact was born from that fear. 47 species signed the first treaty, then 100, then 300. Old enemies put aside hatreds that stretched back millennia. Trade routes opened where borders had been sealed for centuries. Technology flowed between civilizations that had never shared so much as a greeting. And at the center of it all stood humanity, teaching, guiding, building. Calvos had expected them to conquer. She had expected them to use their power to dominate, to rule, to make the galaxy into an extension of their own will. Every species she had ever known would have done exactly that. But the humans surprised her. They did not conquer. They shared. They opened their archives and let Vethkari, scientists, study technologies that made their greatest achievements look like children's toys. They sent teachers to every world that asked for them. They built training facilities where warriors from 100 species learned to fly ships and fire weapons that humanity had spent 30 centuries perfecting, and they asked for nothing in return except one thing: that the galaxy stand together when the darkness came. Calvos stood now on the observation deck of the Combined Defense Initiative's main station, watching a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen perform combat drills in the space beyond. Ships of every shape and size flew in perfect formation, their designs a blend of human transcendent technology and the industrial might of 300 civilizations. Vethkari dreadnoughts flew beside human blade ships. Catherine fighters danced with Marvani cruisers. Weapons that could crack moons fired at targets, while shields that could survive the heart of a star held firm. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was hope made solid and given wings. You were thinking deep thoughts, fleet coordinator. Calvos turned to find Commander Elena Vasquez standing beside her. The human woman had not aged a day in 5 years. No, Calvos knew she was centuries old. Whatever humanity had done to themselves in their long isolation had made them something more than mortal. I am thinking about what we have built, Calvos said. 5 years ago, I was a sensor operator watching for threats that I thought I understood. Now I coordinate the largest military force in galactic history. The change is difficult to accept sometimes. Elena nodded. Change always is. But you have done well. Better than I expected. Better than most of your people expected. I had good teachers. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the fleet move through its drills. Then Calvos asked the question that had been burning in her mind for years. Do you think we can win? Elena did not answer immediately. She looked out at the fleet, at the stations, at the weapons platforms that studded the space around them like stars. Her ancient eyes held something that Calvos could not read. I think, Elena said slowly, that winning is not the right word. The tide cannot be destroyed. It is too vast, too ancient, too spread across the universe. What we can do is hurt it, drive it back, make it bleed so badly that it retreats to lick its wounds for another 1,000,000 years. And then we prepare for the next time. And the time after that. The fight against the tide is not a war that ends with victory. It is a vigil that lasts forever. The moment we stop watching, stop preparing, stop standing ready, is the moment we lose. Calvos considered this. It was not a comforting answer, but it was an honest one, and she had learned to value honesty above comfort. Why do you fight? She asked. You could leave. You could take your ships and your people and go somewhere else, somewhere the tide is not reached yet. You do not need us. Why stay? Elena smiled, and for a moment she looked very young despite her ancient eyes. Because this is home. This galaxy, these stars, these worlds. Humanity was born here. We took our first steps among these stars. We made our first friends and our first enemies here. We fell in love and had children and buried our dead in the soil of 100 worlds. Her voice grew soft. You do not abandon home just because home is in danger. You stand and fight. You protect what matters. That is what humans do. It is what we have always done. Calvos thought about her own world, about the towers of Sithar Prime and the forests of her childhood home, about the faces of people she loved and places she wanted to see again. She understood. We are more alike than I thought, she said quietly. Yes, we are. All species are, in the ways that matter. We all love. We all fear. We all want our children to have better lives than we did. The tide sees us as food, as resources, as things to be consumed. It does not understand that we are more than that. It does not understand that we will fight with everything we have to protect what we love. She turned to face Calvos directly. 3,000 years ago, we faced the tide alone. We were a single species on a single world with nothing but stubbornness and the refusal to die. We survived because we did not know how to quit. We did not know how to accept defeat. We did not know how to stop fighting even when fighting seemed pointless. Her smile grew wider. Now we are not alone. Now we have you. All of you. 300 species standing together. 1 trillion warriors ready to fight. Weapons and ships and defenses that we could never have built by ourselves. She reached out and placed her hand on Calvos' shoulder. The tide has no idea what is coming for it. It expects to find frightened prey scattering before it. Instead, it will find a galaxy united, armed, and angry. It will find us. Calvos felt something stir in her chest. Something warm. Something fierce. She had felt it before, in moments of great crisis, when everything seemed lost, and she found the strength to keep going anyway. She had not known what to call it until now. Hope. What happens now? She asked. Now we finish preparing. We have 45 years until the tide arrives. That is enough time to build the defenses we need, to train the warriors we need, to create the weapons we need. It will not be easy. Many of us will not live to see the end. But our children will, and their children after them. She dropped her hand and turned back to the viewport. My people have a saying, Calvos. It comes from our oldest stories, from a time before we reached the stars, before we even left our single blue world. The night is dark and full of terrors, but the fire burns. And as long as the fire burns, there is hope. She gestured at the fleet beyond the viewport, at the stations and the weapons and the warriors of 100 species working together. This is our fire. All of us, together. And I promise you, when the tide comes, it will burn itself against us. It will break against us like waves against stone. And when it finally retreats, screaming and wounded, we will still be here, standing, fighting, living. Calvos looked out at the fleet, at the future they were building together, at the impossible alliance that should never have existed and yet did. I believe you, she said. Elena laughed softly. Good, because I'm going to need you beside me when the darkness comes. All of you. Every species. Every warrior. Every stubborn soul who refuses to give up. She turned and began walking toward the command center, her stride confident, her shoulders straight. Come, fleet coordinator. We have work to do. The tide waits for no one. Calvos followed her, leaving the observation deck behind. Through the viewport, the fleet continued its endless dance, preparing for a war that would span generations. The galaxy was no longer on edge. The galaxy was ready, and somewhere out in the darkness between stars, moving closer with every passing moment. The devouring tide continued, its ancient journey toward a meal it expected to find defenseless. It was wrong, for the first time in its million-year existence. It was about to discover what happened when prey refused to be eaten. It was about to discover humanity. And humanity did not know how to lose.